It is spring 1965, early morning in an Israeli cafe. The tables hold plates of shakshuka, bowls of hummus, warm pita, and small cups of strong coffee. At one table sit two men, no longer young, who meet here infrequently but with regular timing, perhaps once or twice each month. To a waiter's trained eye, their posture and bearing suggest a military background. From their subtle gestures and the tone of command in their voices, it is clear these are men of high rank. They converse calmly, their words encoded in a manner that makes them indecipherable even to a nearby listener. Years later, before his own death, one of these men would recount the essence of this conversation. The man wearing glasses asks a simple question: "How can I help you?" The other replies without the slightest hesitation: "Can you hijack a plane for me? I need a MiG21. The first man responds that such a thing is almost impossible. The second answers simply, "I know, otherwise I would not have asked." This is the true beginning of one of the most audacious intelligence operations of the 20th century, a mission that would alter the balance of power in the Middle East and save countless lives. To understand this story is to understand the desperate ingenuity of a nation fighting for its survival against overwhelming odds. This narrative explores the incredible history of Israeli intelligence, focusing on an operation that successfully stole a Soviet MiG-21 fighter jet from under the vigilant noses of both Soviet and Arab security services. The tale intertwines high-stakes geopolitics, deep religious and ethnic divisions, a Jewish fixer living in Iraq, a cinematic plot worthy of a spy film, European capitals serving as backdrops for conspiracy, and an unwavering determination to secure a nation's future. The mission's success hinged on the complex human drama of a single pilot and the extensive network that enabled his defection. First, it is essential to understand why Israel needed this specific aircraft. The MiG-21 fighter was a paramount objective, and the human cost of various attempts to acquire it was steep. To grasp the full context, one must look at a map of Israel and its neighbors, nations that had officially declared their intention to destroy the state from its very first day. These adversaries were actively pursuing that goal. A powerful patron, the Soviet Union, supplied these countries with vast quantities of modern weapons, including the latest military technology. However, Egypt had only 97 pilots qualified to fly this advanced machine, often called the Flying Kalashnikov. Syria operated 32 MiGs, and Iraq 75. In short, this small nation on the Mediterranean coast was surrounded by hostile states equipped with the pride of the Soviet aviation industry. The MiG-21 jet fighter. Development of the MiG-21 began in the late 1950s. It was a remarkably compact and lightweight aircraft with a distinctive delta wing design, resembling a swept-back bird of prey. It was conceived as an interceptor, a fighter whose primary role was to scramble quickly, gain altitude with rapid ascent, and intercept incoming enemy bombers or fighters. At the time of its introduction, the MiG-21 was considered one of the most advanced combat aircraft in the world. It was capable of supersonic flight, meaning it could easily exceed the speed of sound, representing a significant technological achievement. Furthermore, it possessed relatively sophisticated avionics for its era, including an onboard radar system that allowed it to effectively detect and engage targets. In essence, the MiG-21 was a leap into the future for the 1960s, combining high speed, impressive maneuverability, and relative ease of maintenance. This combination made it one of the most widely produced and exported fighter jets globally, supplied to dozens of nations. For its time, it was the equivalent of a cutting-edge smartphone among fighter jets, a symbol of peak aviation technology. During the early 1960s, the United States maintained a policy of extreme caution regarding the supply of offensive weapons to the Middle East, including Israel. This was, in effect, a form of embargo. The Mirage III was itself a highly respected and capable fighter of the era, known for superb maneuverability and excellent performance in air combat. However, in certain key areas, the MiG-21 held advantages. It could climb faster and had a slight edge in straight-line speed. It was also simpler and cheaper to manufacture, which led to its mass production and widespread availability. Despite being a rock star of the global defense industry, countries without access to the fighter lacked vital, hands-on data. The West had technical specifications, photographs, and intelligence reports. It knew the aircraft's speed, range, and radar type, but this was insufficient. A pilot climbing into the cockpit of a Mirage, facing a MiG-21 in a head-on engagement, needed to know entirely different things. At what altitudes did the MiG suffer from control lapses? How quickly did it lose energy in tight turns? What happened if you forced it to stall? How did its radar lock onto a target, and where were its blind spots? The answers could only be obtained in one definitive way: by flying the aircraft yourself. This is precisely why the Israeli Air Force Command relentlessly pressured politicians and intelligence agencies with one clear demand: get us a MiG-21 at any cost. That cost would prove to be extraordinarily high. The first serious attempt to acquire a MiG-21 was orchestrated in Egypt. Based on available information, the operation was run through an agent named Jean Thomas, a French-speaking Christian living in Egypt who had cultivated contacts within military officer circles. He made contact with an Egyptian pilot qualified to fly the coveted fighter. The offer was straightforward: a large sum of money, reported to be $100,000, and political asylum in exchange for flying the aircraft to a prearranged location where it could be intercepted. Egyptian intelligence, however, was alert. The pilot involved either informed his superiors or was already under surveillance. Conversations were recorded, and the network was rolled up. The Egyptians arrested several individuals, including Jean Thomas. A closed trial found all guilty of espionage for Israel, sentencing them to death. Reports indicate Thomas was executed in December 1962. This was a devastating blow, a clear signal that the pursuit of the MiG-21 would cost lives. Yet, the mission continued. After the failure in Egypt, intelligence focus shifted to Iraq. From public records, we know that attempts were made to recruit several pilots serving in a specific squadron there. One pilot appeared agreeable to contact, while another seems to have been playing a double game. Iraqi counterintelligence, much like Egypt's, was highly vigilant. Several officers fell under suspicion. Some disappeared, others were imprisoned. Israeli sources and memoirs suggest that Iraqi pilots suspected of connections to Israel were sometimes silenced permanently. This brings us back to the opening scene, the conversation in the cafe. The two old friends were the new head of Mossad, General Meir Amit, who had just taken command and needed to demonstrate his agency's capabilities, and Ezer Wiseman, then the commander-in-chief of the Israeli Air Force, who made the direct request to steal the plane. Into this high-stakes environment entered a key figure, Yosef Shemesh. He was a fashionable playboy, a known womanizer with an extensive network of contacts across various spheres. Crucially, he was also one of the few Jews who continued to live in Iraq. To follow the logic of subsequent events, one must understand the context of Iraq in the early 1960s. Iraq was and is a nation of multiple ethnic groups and religions, where significant tensions existed between different communities. The Kurdish population, for instance, lived not only in Iraq but also in Turkey, Iran, and Syria. They possessed their own distinct language and culture, and harbored long-standing dreams of independence or substantial autonomy. In the mid-20th century, conflict flared intensely in northern Iraq, with a protracted war between the government in Baghdad and Kurdish rebels led by Mustafa Barzani. The Iraqi authorities were deeply concerned by this insurgency. Following the overthrow of the monarchy and the rise to power of first Abdul Karim Qasim and later the Ba'ath Party, Baghdad sought to exert firm control over its periphery, leading to regular armed clashes, punitive operations, and aerial bombardments of Kurdish villages. A critical point is that Iraqi air power became a primary tool for pressuring the Kurds. Reports indicate the use of napalm in these bombings, with MiG-21 fighters participating in the operations. This strategy involved building alliances not only with Western powers, but also with regional actors who were in conflict with Israel's Arab enemies. This included Iran, Turkey, Ethiopian Christians, and, significantly, the Iraqi Kurds. Through its intelligence services, Israel established strong ties with Kurdish leadership, providing weapons, military training, and medical aid. For Israel, this was a method to weaken a primary adversary, Iraq. For the Kurds, it represented a valuable external ally in their struggle against Baghdad. Over time, these connections grew strong enough to facilitate special operations, including the covert evacuation of people across mountainous terrain into Iran. This Kurdish route would later become essential for smuggling the family of an Iraqi pilot to safety. Another crucial factor was Iraq's demographic mosaic, which included Assyrian Christians, Turkmen, and other minorities. The government, especially after successive coups, viewed these groups with suspicion. For individuals from these backgrounds, building a career, particularly in the prestigious Army or Air Force, was exceedingly difficult. Israeli intelligence paid close attention to these marginalized minorities, as their members, often facing discrimination, could still attain positions as officers or engineers with access to sensitive military installations. Despite this focus, a suitable candidate for recruitment remained elusive. Then, Yosef Shemesh contacted Mossad with a proposition. He knew the perfect person. Initially met with skepticism, Shemesh was tested with minor intelligence-gathering tasks. He completed them with ease and reiterated his bold claim, "We will hijack the plane." Shemesh was handled by a Mossad officer named Yaakov Nimrodi, who was fluent in Arabic and Farsi. Nimrodi told Shemesh to present his plan. The plan Shemesh outlined was as colorful as his own life. He spoke of his mistress, who was a Christian, and mentioned that her sister was married to an Iraqi Air Force pilot. This pilot, Shemesh suggested, was a diamond in the rough, capable of being polished into the central asset for a meticulously planned operation. This brings us to the man without whom Operation Diamond would not have existed, Munir Redfa. Born in 1934 in Baghdad into a Christian Assyrian family belonging to the Chaldean Catholic Church, Redfa was neither an ethnic Arab nor a Muslim. In the context of a post-revolutionary Iraqi military, this background was a significant professional hindrance. From a young age, Redfa demonstrated a single, powerful talent. He was an exceptional pilot. In post-war Iraq, pilots represented an elite class, enjoying uniforms, status, respect, high salaries, and opportunities for travel abroad. Redfa trained diligently, advanced through the ranks, and eventually was assigned to the premier unit, the 11th Squadron, which at the time was the only Iraqi squadron equipped with the new MiG-21s. Following the Qasim coup and the subsequent Ba'athist rise, the new regimes demanded absolute loyalty. Only a small, trusted cadre of pilots remained in the MiG squadron, and Munir Redfa was among them. This appears as a success story, but there was a profound underlying tension. Redfa confided to friends, including Yosef Shemesh, that due to his Christian faith, he was never fully trusted by his superiors. They openly indicated he had reached the ceiling of his career. He would not be promoted further due to his origins. He was excluded from secret briefings. He was required to live apart from his family in a city closer to the airbase, isolating him from a normal domestic life. Furthermore, he was often subjected to deliberate operational restrictions, such as having his aircraft's fuel tanks underfilled before flights, a precaution taken by a command that feared he might attempt to defect. Thus, while officially an elite pilot, he was daily reminded that he was a second-class member of that elite. The second, more profound difficulty was moral. Redfa was repeatedly ordered on combat missions against Kurdish villages, targeting essentially defenseless civilian settlements. In later interviews, he expressed particular anguish over missions involving napalm, knowing that the victims were often women, children, and the elderly, as the men were away fighting. Yosef Shemesh took on the delicate task of cultivating Munir Redfa as a potential asset. The ground was fertile. Given his personal and professional grievances, Redfa was a suitable candidate. However, the risks were immense. Redfa had a large, extended Middle Eastern family, a wife, 2 young children, parents, siblings, and other relatives. It was clear that if he defected, the entire family would face severe reprisals, including arrest, torture, or execution. Shemesh spent approximately a year on the recruitment effort, building a personal relationship with Redfa, socializing with him, and by some accounts, even attempting to introduce him to other women. For Redfa, however, family was paramount. Consequently, the primary condition in any future negotiation with Mossad would not concern money or asylum first, but a single demand: you must evacuate my entire family to safety before I will even consider your proposal. Just as a preliminary understanding was reached, another element entered the picture. Redfa's wife was diagnosed with a serious, potentially life-threatening illness. This medical situation was leveraged by Mossad as part of an elaborate cover story. Israeli officers needed to speak with Redfa directly, which was impossible inside Iraq. Under the pretext that specialized medical examination and treatment were only available in Athens, the couple, the pilot and his ailing wife, who was reportedly unaware of the severity of the alleged diagnosis, traveled to Greece. It was Shemesh who helped convince Iraqi officials of the necessity for this medical trip, arguing that Munir's English language skills were essential for navigating foreign health care. In Athens, Redfa met with an Israeli Air Force officer, Colonel Zvika Lyern. Mossad had requested an Air Force officer to establish rapport with Redfa, speaking the technical language of a pilot. Lyern posed as a Polish pilot connected to an anti-communist organization. Redfa shared his frustrations about his life and career. Lyern suggested they continue their discussions in a more relaxed setting on one of the Greek islands. During a late-night conversation at a villa, the supposed Polish pilot revealed his true identity and made the official proposal to Redfa. After a night of reflection, Redfa presented his terms the following day. According to Lyern's later recollections, Redfa's demands were surprisingly modest given the stakes. Mossad had authorized a substantial financial offer, with instructions to double the amount if initially refused. This escalation proved unnecessary. An agreement was reached for 500,000 British pounds. A handshake sealed the deal. Following this, Mayor Amit, the head of Mossad, decided to personally vet the asset. The setting shifted to Rome, the Eternal City, perhaps chosen to help the Iraqi pilot comprehend the historic scale of the endeavor he was joining. Amidst the ancient ruins, a modern spy drama was unfolding. Amit, incognito, observed Redfa during a final meeting in a cafe. A single glance was enough for the experienced intelligence chief to confirm his confidence in the man. He gave a subtle nod of approval to his operatives and departed. With the pilot's agreement and the intelligence chief's blessing, one might assume the plan was set. However, Redfa had never been to Israel. He needed to see his destination, to understand the landing procedures and the route. To facilitate this, another trip was arranged, this time from Athens to Israel itself. Mossad provided Redfa with false documents under the name Mirage and a ticket on an El Al flight. A near catastrophe occurred at the Greek airport. As Colonel Lyern boarded the plane, he realized Redfa was not beside him. Panic ensued. It was later discovered that Redfa, perhaps subconsciously skeptical of the entire scheme, had mistakenly boarded a flight bound for Cairo. Egyptian flight attendants, conducting a passenger count, identified the stowaway and had him removed. The shaken Redfa was then put on the correct flight to Tel Aviv. In Israel, Redfa was taken directly to a military airbase. He was greeted by a delegation of Israeli Air Force officers and pilots, including high-ranking officials. This reception was a deliberate psychological tactic. In Iraq, he was perpetually kept at arm's length as a minority Christian. Here, he was treated as a valued partner. He was welcomed at the officers' club, given a tour of the base, and walked through the detailed plan for his future landing. They showed him the intended runway, the approach path, where escort fighters would meet him, and where a security team would secure him immediately after touchdown. Among those present was Issi Barkai, the Israeli Air Force's chief intelligence officer. Barkai wanted first-hand verification that Redfa was indeed a competent pilot and not part of an elaborate Iraqi deception. He proposed a test flight with Redfa in a standard training aircraft. Despite concerns from other intelligence officers about the risk of Redfa hijacking the plane or crashing it, Barkai insisted. The two men suited up. The mission was to climb to 15,000 meters, turn east, and fly a loop over Jordanian territory. Redfa took the controls, executed a sharp turn, crossed the Jordan River, and flew deep into Jordanian airspace before returning and soaring over Jerusalem. 50 minutes later, they landed back at Lod Airport, removed their helmets and embraced. The test was a complete success. Following this, Israeli officers conducted detailed, map-based briefings with Redfa, simulating the entire flight from takeoff in Iraq to landing in Israel. They discussed radio silence, optimal altitudes to avoid radar, procedures if intercepted by Jordanian or Syrian fighters, and identification signals. For Redfa, this meticulous planning served as emotional confirmation. These were not distant bureaucrats but professional military men invested in his survival as much as in acquiring the aircraft. Their message was clear: we need you to succeed. 24 hours later, Redfa returned to Iraq via the same circuitous route through Athens. To his Iraqi superiors, this was simply a routine return from leave. For him, the escape contract was all but signed, pending the fulfillment of its most critical clause. The paramount condition was family safety. The pilot would not take off until his entire extended family was confirmed to be out of Iraq's reach. This requirement shifted the operational focus from the aircraft to the people, a task of immense complexity. The immediate family, his wife and 2 young children, were extracted first under a cover story of a summer vacation to Europe won in a supposed contest, a believable scenario for the family of a well-connected officer. He was an Israeli officer, and their husband and father planned to defect. New passports and plane tickets were presented. They would fly to Israel the next day. Redfa's wife reacted with understandable fury and distress, threatening to contact authorities and accusing the Israelis of kidnapping. It took extensive persuasion, a mixture of calm reasoning and implied threats, to finally secure her reluctant compliance. This, however, was merely the beginning. The concept of family in the Middle East is expansive. Mossad needed to evacuate approximately 15 to 17 people, including Redfa's parents, siblings, and other relatives. Some were extracted via relatively calm methods, using tourist or medical visas with staggered departures to avoid suspicion. For the remainder, a more daring route was activated on the very day of Redfa's planned flight. Operatives collected these relatives from various locations in and around Baghdad and drove them north toward the Kurdish region. At the Iranian border, Kurdish fighters with whom Israel had established a strong cooperative relationship were waiting. They guided the group through mountainous paths, evading Iraqi patrols. On the Iranian side, Israeli liaisons met the evacuees. They were transported by helicopter to Tehran and from there flown to Israel. With his family finally safe, the last barrier was removed for Munir Redfa, but a final signal was needed to inform him that the operation was a go. The method was brilliantly simple. Redfa kept a radio in his quarters tuned to Call Yisrael, Israel's Arabic-language broadcast service. At a prearranged time, the radio would play a specific song. Upon hearing that song, Redfa would know it was time to execute the plan. There was no turning back. Curiously, some details from Redfa's own recollections nearly jeopardized the mission. As he prepared for his final departure, he decided to sell off his household belongings, furniture, personal items, even his car. To Mossad handlers, this was a nightmare scenario. A pilot of a top-secret fighter jet selling his possessions could easily alert Iraqi counterintelligence. Fortunately, no one in authority took notice of this activity. The stage was now set. On August 15, 1966, a typically hot morning at an Iraqi airbase, MiG-21s were lined up on the tarmac. Pilots prepared for routine training flights. To all observers, Munir Redfa was just another pilot. No one knew he was embarking on a one-way mission. He received his flight assignment, a standard training exercise. Technicians started the engine and ran through system checks. Redfa monitored every procedure closely, knowing any malfunction could force an abort and potentially doom the entire operation. Ironically, a problem did occur. Shortly after taxiing and receiving takeoff clearance, as the aircraft accelerated, the cockpit began filling with smoke. Redfa was forced to return to base. Technicians inspected the aircraft and found a blown electrical fuse, a minor issue. The plane was refueled, this time notably without the usual restrictions, and cleared for flight again. This incident may have ultimately aided the operation by making the second, real attempt seem like a simple continuation of the first. On the second attempt, the MiG-21 climbed into the sky. Redfa flew most of the route at very low altitude to minimize radar detection. He maintained strict radio silence. Any transmission could raise immediate suspicion about deviations from his flight plan. At a certain point, the aircraft simply vanished from Iraqi radar screens. Controllers likely assumed a technical glitch, but Redfa was already heading for the Jordanian border. When the MiG entered Jordanian airspace, local radar operators detected it and contacted their Syrian counterparts, suggesting the unidentified fighter might be one of theirs. The Syrians, after a check, reportedly reassured the Jordanians that it was indeed a Syrian aircraft on a training exercise. This miscommunication was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. For any Israeli pilot, the instinctive reaction to seeing an enemy MiG was to engage and destroy it, especially in the tense pre-war climate of 1966. On this day, however, they operated under strict orders from the Air Force commander, Mordechai Had. They were to escort, not attack. The Mirages visually identified the MiG-21, positioned themselves alongside it, and signaled the direction to the landing field. Redfa responded with the universal signal of surrender, lowering his landing gear and, by some accounts, gently waggling his wings. He later stated that after the 50-minute flight, he landed with his fuel tanks virtually empty. The margin for error had been calculated to the last liter. Any delay or extra maneuver would have resulted in a crash. The MiG-21, serial number 534, touched down smoothly at Hatzer Air Base. A team of soldiers rushed toward the aircraft, not to arrest the pilot, but to swiftly extract and protect him. Then, an unexpected and almost comical problem arose. In the meticulous planning involving dozens of operatives, international logistics, and vast expenditures, one simple detail had been overlooked. Israel had never possessed a MiG-21, and therefore had no compatible ladder or access steps to reach the cockpit. The pilot was effectively trapped in his aircraft. A surreal pause lasted roughly 40 minutes until the base commander, General Modi Had, thought to call a fire truck with an extendable ladder to solve the problem. While this detail may seem apocryphal, it has been recounted by multiple participants. After this delay, events moved rapidly. Redfa was helped from the cockpit and taken to a secure debriefing room. At that moment, 3 transformative events occurred simultaneously. First, Israel finally possessed its coveted prize, a fully operational MiG-21. Second, Munir Redfa ceased to be an Iraqi officer and became a defector, his future entirely in the hands of his new hosts. Third, Iraq remained unaware of its loss, initially assuming the aircraft had simply crashed. The work began immediately. Medical personnel examined Redfa, checking his physical and mental state after the stressful flight. He was assured his family was safe. What followed was not an interrogation but a series of intensive debriefings. Mossad officers, military intelligence, Amin, representatives, and Israeli Air Force test pilots all questioned him. Intelligence officials sought information on the Iraqi Air Force's structure, base locations, duty rotations, and patrol routes. Mossad was interested in the details of the conspiracy and potential future contacts. Test pilots focused on the MiG-21's technical performance, handling characteristics, strengths, and weaknesses. Concurrently, the aircraft itself was moved into a secure hangar. Engineers and technicians began a thorough process of reverse engineering, disassembling panels, studying the radar, weapons systems, avionics, and aerodynamic design. They were, in essence, writing the manual on how to defeat a MiG-21 in combat. The captured jet was given a new Israeli serial number, 7. This was a deliberate nod to the popular James Bond films, a touch of cinematic humor acknowledging the operation's dramatic, spy thriller nature. A few days after the debriefings, with the MiG reassembled and checked, the time came for Israeli test pilots to fly it. The task was entrusted to Captain Danny Shapira, one of Israel's most experienced test pilots. Shapira first met Redfa at Herzliya, where Redfa reportedly stood at attention upon meeting him. They then traveled to Hatzer Air Base. Shapira climbed into the cockpit as Redfa explained the controls, labeled in Russian and Arabic. After a brief familiarization, Shapira announced he was ready to fly. Redfa was initially shocked, but Shapira calmly explained his role. As Shapira prepared for takeoff, Ezer Wiseman, the Air Force commander who had originally requested the plane, approached the cockpit and joked that Shapira should remember to bring the aircraft back. Shapira's flight involved testing the MiG-21's performance envelope. Takeoffs, climbs, steep turns at various speeds, aggressive maneuvers, dive recoveries, and stall behavior. He compared its performance directly against the Israeli Air Force's Mirage IIIs. A vital tactical picture quickly emerged, understanding where the MiG excelled, where it was vulnerable, and how a Mirage pilot could exploit those vulnerabilities. The value of this intelligence was proven just months later, in April 1967, during a major air battle on the Syrian-Israeli border. Syrian MiG-21s engaged Israeli Mirage IIIs. Israeli pilots, now armed with the knowledge gained from flying and studying the captured MiG, employed specific tactics designed to negate its advantages. The result was a decisive Israeli victory. Syria lost 6 MiG-21s without any Israeli losses. When Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser learned of the battle, he declined to intervene, claiming the mutual defense pact with Syria applied only to full-scale war. A full-scale conflict was indeed imminent. 2 months later, the Six-Day War began. On its first day, Israel launched preemptive strikes against airfields in Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. MiG-21s were often parked in neat, exposed rows. A significant portion of the Arab air forces was destroyed on the ground. In a single morning, Egypt lost nearly 300 combat aircraft. Jordan's entire small air force was eliminated. Syria lost over 50 aircraft. Several Iraqi aircraft were also destroyed. Did the stolen MiG-21 influence this outcome? Absolutely. The technical knowledge allowed Israeli pilots to engage with greater confidence and effectiveness. Perhaps more importantly, the study confirmed that the best way to handle the MiG-21 was to prevent it from taking off at all, a strategy executed with devastating success. After the war, the captured MiG-21 remained an asset of immense value. Israel recognized it as a powerful bargaining chip. One nation was particularly eager to examine the Soviet fighter, the United States, which was then engaged in the Vietnam War, where its pilots regularly battled North Vietnamese MiG-21s. The MiG-21 was temporarily transferred to the United States for a comprehensive evaluation program at a secret test site, often associated in popular culture with Area 51. American Air Force and Navy pilots flew the MiG-21 extensively, simulating dogfights against American fighters like the F-4 Phantom and F-105 Thunderchief. They developed and refined tactics for both engaging and evading the MiG. The data collected formed the basis for updated pilot training manuals and tactical doctrine, providing a significant advantage to American aviators in Southeast Asia. While the operational and strategic successes of Operation Diamond are clear, the personal story of Munir Redfa is more poignant and less triumphant. In the Arab press of the era, he was vilified as an archetypal traitor, a man who sold his homeland for gold and betrayed his comrades. Later publications sometimes painted a bleak picture of his life in exile, suggesting his marriage failed, his children struggled, and he died early and unhappy, a moral lesson on the fruits of betrayal. The reality was complex. In his initial months in Israel, Redfa worked as a consultant to the Air Force, explaining Iraqi tactics and assisting engineers. He later transitioned to a career in civil aviation as both a pilot and instructor. He received a new home, new documents, and a new life. Yet the adjustment was profoundly difficult. He was a man raised in the culture of Baghdad, an Assyrian Christian with Arabic language and customs, suddenly transplanted into the small, tense, and culturally distinct society of 1960s Israel. His relationship with his wife, strained by the circumstances of their flight, deteriorated further. His extended family, uprooted from their lives, also faced significant challenges. After several years, Israel honored its commitment to help Redfa and his family relocate to a Western country, believed to be in Europe or North America, for reasons of security and a fresh start. Munir Redfa died of a heart attack at a relatively young age, with reported dates varying between 1988 and 2000. His passing was marked by a memorial service attended by Mossad personnel who remembered the man behind the legendary operation. In Israel, the MiG-21 with the tail number 7 is preserved as a monument at the Israeli Air Force Museum. It stands as a testament to a daring intelligence coup and to the individual whose personal decision made it possible. The fighter that provided a crucial advantage in a time of existential threat is sometimes referred to by another operational name, penicillin, a powerful medicine that helped cure a patient in crisis. This story illustrates the intricate blend of human courage, detailed planning, and geopolitical maneuvering that defines the shadow world of intelligence. The risks were monumental, the costs were real, but the outcome irrevocably shaped the history of a region. If you found this journey into a pivotal moment of history compelling, please show your support by liking this video. Subscribing to the channel ensures you won't miss future explorations of similar untold stories. Sharing this content helps spread knowledge of these complex historical events. Your engagement through comments and feedback is always valued, as it fosters a deeper understanding for everyone. Thank you for watching, Ling. Please show your support by liking this video. Subscribing to the channel ensures you won't miss future explorations of similar untold stories. Sharing this content helps spread knowledge of these complex historical events. Your engagement through comments and feedback is always valued, as it fosters a deeper understanding for everyone. Thank you for watching.